example, a question around feminism is an African. Now, this has been said by many governments, by many peoples, have been used as a tool to actually close feminist organizations, departments in academia, shut down movements. We have been doing that, but that being used as just a casual thing that people use, but actually it's a very deliberately done disinformation. And so attacking that or coming back at it from a place of not only understanding patriarchy and all that, which is very important, but also to think about how that also works into the manifestation of what we see in the African continent. The same goes with homosexuality is an African. That's also another thing that we see how, it's, for example, in Ethiopia, in Uganda, and other countries where you see governments actually use that to create a sense of emotion, sensationalization of situations, to get back to crack down queer folks. And so those casual, gossip kind words that goes through needs to be called through and researched, and then really have to be shown how their impact is in our lives. Lastly, I wanted to say gendered stereotypes. It's a good thing that to do gender stereotype and sexualities and anti-gender movements, but also to think about how it comes to disciplines. Like, for example, feminism has been one of the disciplines that has been really trolled, really displaced, really sidelined as a political agenda. And I think researchers, again, need to come back to that conversation and show how there is a link between how feminist activists experience online in relation to what has been produced on the offline spaces as a narrative, as a discourse amongst governments, among social media organizations, among civil society organizations, so that we can make that link and really show how we can mitigate that kind of risk. I think let me stop here.
Thank you very much, Tigis. Yesterday I was in a session, and after everybody spoke, we clapped hands, and it made the room warm. So let's do that. Yes, Tigis, thank you very much for setting the floor, and you point very crucial issues, you know, the gaps that research should fill, you know, how the not recognizing gender disinformation, how it's casually treated, the focus, refocusing, and also considering grassroots organizations. So thank you very much, Tigis, for bringing that. And I would like to move forward, and I would like to come to you, Sandra. You work for a women's rights organization. How are you approaching, you know, gender disinformation? What are some of the learnings from your work that you would like to share with us?
Okay, so thank you so much, Peace, for that question. Again, as a women's rights organization, Women of Uganda Network, we really deeply very committed in ensuring how we can collectively counter gender disinformation. And our approach has been a mix, and very happy that Tigis was able to highlight some of the aspect of importance of research, capacity building, awareness creation, and the collective efforts with various stakeholders. So just giving a bit of the context in Uganda, the various common forms of gender disinformation or how it manifests, and one of it is information manipulation using AI, that I think has been very common in most of the regions, but also the demonization of intellectual ideals such as gender equality, but also various forms of abuse such as trolling, insult, body shaming, sexualized comments, and also gender-based attacks. So what we have been able to do as an organization is most of it documentation of evidence, and I'll give some of the context in regards to the Anti-Homosexuality Act that was passed last year in 2023, and I'll also speak more to, as Uganda go towards the election period. So speaking towards, especially around Anti-Homosexuality Act, there's been a lot of narratives of repainting of the kids' playground because it has a rainbow color, and then also banning of watches that has a rainbow color. And this really shows how the narratives and the extremism of how people are trying to perceive gender disinformation, and also a sort of discrimination on the groups such as the LGBTI community. But also there have been several examples of persons who have been perceived as queer, being evicted by their landlords from their homes, the denial of HIV medicine and other sexual and reproductive health and rights, which is a human right, and everyone is entitled to health, to sexual and reproductive health, whether you identify as another person. So these are some of the very documented horrors that are stated by disinformation, but that really affect specific genders. And one of the very prominent examples is also, there was a trendy hashtag, I don't know if the Ugandans here might have seen it, called Fear Women. So it was one of the examples of how gender disinformation is also used to reinforce the patriarchal norms and also further affect the dignity of women, silence them, and trying to perceive women in different ways. And then speaking more to gender disinformation during the electoral landscape, as Uganda is gearing towards the 2026 general elections, we are facing a very pressing challenges in regards to the increase of gender disinformation. And this has really posed a lot of challenges, especially for female political participation in leadership, and this affects democracy. And I will cite some of the examples of women politicians that we have also been able to speak and also interview and share their narratives. And one of the examples that is very commonly is Honorable Sylvia Raboga. She's now a former member of parliament. So in 2022, WUGNED also had an interview with her to find out how our experience was able to affect being re-elected into the position. So in 2018, there was a young gentleman called Brian Masiko, who was able to cyber stalk her. And then when I think the way the media reported it was kind of belittled her. And this also led to how information about especially women can be manipulated into the online platform. So it really portrayed her as someone who is weak, and also and this also then played being able to participate into the online, into the political participation. And then also another example was in 2022, Dr. Maria Matembe, who is also a very pronounced all-season politician and a women's rights activist. So she filed a defamation suit against Ofondo Opondo, who is also a government spokesperson. So following this, Ofondo was allegedly saying that her husband is now has left her for a housemaid. So this really highlights how gender disinformation also target or distort the public image of women, especially in the position of power and all that. So there were also various women politicians, such as the former member of parliament, Rebecca Kadaga, that has also faced gender disinformation, and Doreen Nyandura, who was also being able to face gender disinformation. So I wanted to give this kind of highlights that Women of Uganda Network has been able to document such instances, but also see how then what can we do, especially having this. So we have been able to design a needs assessment to now speak to specific politicians through the Uganda Women's Parliamentary Network, and also design capacity building trainings, especially digital literacy training, to see how women, especially in position of power, can identify that is this formation false, how can we also stop this narrative? So I think that is a very good aspect of also countering gender information. But also we want to use the awareness creation also to build some resources, hold Twitter spaces, conduct a number of advocacy initiative where politicians and also journalists can come and speak about how, share their experience. I think that is one way that we can also be able to counter this narrative. So from the learning of our work, we have been able to learn that intersectionality is very key. Why? It's because gender disinformation does not occur in isolation. It also intersects with other forms of disinformation, such as racism and homophobia. So it's very important that intersectionality approach, it will help us to consider the various identities and experiences of women, but also digital literacy is empowerment. And as Women of Uganda Network, digital literacy is a very important element of our work. So to conduct a number of digital literacy training, not only with the women politicians, but also with the media, who are able to also report these issues. How are they able to portray women's issues into the media? But also community support really matters, knowing that you have a community network. I am glad that I've been able to meet Angela Muzuri through the work that we have been able to do on gender disinformation, the APC network. So that has been very important, and also being able to speak and collectively think of what can you do as a collective to counter gender disinformation. And then also knowing that policy change is very important but slow. So if we are able to design policies that can counter gender disinformation is very key. In the Ugandan context, we have policies such as the Computer Misuse Act. It's not very direct, but what are we going to do to ensure that we have a lot of policy advocacy, targeted campaigns to be able to counter gender disinformation. So I would like to stop here and thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. And some people did not clap. I am taking notes anyway. So thank you very much, Sandra, and thank you for sharing those examples. You know, sometimes we think these things are not true, and the hashtag that Sandra mentioned, Fear Women, was such a thing in the wave of Uganda. So thank you for sharing all those, and also mention, you know, some of the key things that we need to do and some of the learnings that you have from WorkNet. I think this is very important to learn about. We will leave that there so that we listened to all, and then we will come back and sum up everything. So Angela, Sandra already mentioned your name. I had not planned to come to you, but she mentioned your name. So you work for Article 19, and Angela also happens to be a lawyer. I would like you to, you know, share with us what Article 19 has been doing in terms of policy advocacy, and also what are some of the legal frameworks that you know that exist in the region that we could use, you know. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've been mentioned, so I'll just add the layer to the story of how we ended up here. We had a session on the same topic during the Digital Rights and Inclusion Forum and Peace, and Sandra was part of the crowd, and then we ended up having now this, and I like that organic approach to campaigning or to advocacy, because we give life to what someone else has started. So at least I didn't have to organize the session. Peace took over from me and so forth. So I think it's encouraging. I look forward to what we can do together with some of the panel, some of the members of the audience. Now back to my work. So at Article 19, we work for a world where we can speak freely and also have access to information. But we do not, we also understand the dynamics that gender presents when we are trying to promote freedom of expression and access to information. I'm also a feminist, and I believe that being a woman is a political position, whether you like it or not. If you present as a woman in this world, there are politics around you, politics around how you speak, how you talk, how you dress, how you do makeup, how you do your hair, right? And these politics can look like gender stereotypes. Yeah, we have had the various examples being given by the panelists here. I don't have to go back to them. But that should tell you that just because the body of a woman is a political position, it's a political statement on its own, it's going to attract attacks online. Now, we believe that this is a duplication or a replication of society's ideas around what it means to be a man or a woman. So I don't think that the problem is Meta or the problem is Twitter. The problem is us as a society. It's a reflection of us as a society. Whatever technology presents, whatever challenges sometimes we have with technology, have its roots in our own cultures, in our own ways of doing things. In terms of advocacy around gender disinformation, it was quite a joy really for me when I joined Article 19 last year. And we're already having programs around misinformation and disinformation. And having the gender aspects to it was really, how can I say this, a momentous thing. Because what we did is we did a resolution under a different project called Social Media for Peace. And this resolution was on acknowledging gender disinformation as a variance to how women are attacked online, women and minorities are attacked online, and calling for a multi-stakeholder approach in how we do things. And I know multi-stakeholder is such a beaten down word in these rooms. We keep saying them, we keep repeating them, and the meaningfulness of that word sometimes gets to question. I question sometimes the efficiency of the multi-stakeholder model, knowing very well that in some rooms it's a multilateral process and sometimes civil society is no any other. We also know that the laws we have around disinformation and misinformation, because you asked me, can the laws respond? We know how the laws operate in this region, right? The so-called fake laws, the fake news and the false information news have not been used to protect women and minorities. If anything, these laws have been used to silence critical voices and people who are saying things that the government deems false simply because they're critical of the government. And so the question is, even when I'm in rooms where we're talking about online safety, is to question the application of the laws being passed in the guise of safety, right? Are these laws really protecting women? In Kenya, most of the application of the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, which has the laws on misinformation and disinformation, is Section 18 and Section, I think Section 23 of the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. And most of the time, these cases or charges under that are against critical voices against the government. We also have similar laws in Ethiopia, similar laws in Tanzania, and similar laws in Uganda. But we're not seeing them being applied in a way that protects women and minorities. And that brings to question what I've kept on saying, that being a woman is a political position, right? And even when laws are being passed, I feel they don't have in mind the queer woman, right? Or the trans woman. They have in mind what we know is the right way to be a woman. And every time I'm talking to victims of tech-facilitated gender-based violence or trying to ask other lawyers to take up their cases, I always start by saying there's no perfect victim. Because the person I'm advocating for could be a sex worker online, okay? They're not presenting in the nice way to be a woman, and that presents problem in how people feel what they're going through. Is it deserving? They'll say, but she dresses, you know, a certain way, so what do you expect when you go online? So this norms and stereotypes around what it is to be a woman and a man keep on coming up in the entire cycle, from how the gender disinformation is presented to how the victims are dealt with in our justice system, or even just by how the society looks at them. So Article 19 has worked on the work on gender disinformation and misinformation under the Social Media for Peace project. We continue talking about gendered aspects to technology law, be it tech-facilitated gender-based violence, be it the technology's problem of normalizing abuse and violence against women. So I will stop at that in case there are any other questions.
Yes, I saw many hand claps. Thank you. Thank you very much, Angela, and thank you for pointing out these issues around the laws not being inclusive, the selective use of them, you know, the challenges or the gaps that we have. You know, the reflection, what we see online is a reflection of our society. The norms, you know, the culture, thank you for bringing them out. And definitely these are really issues that affect our work as we try to counter gender disinformation. And again, you also mentioned government, and we have someone from the government who is Shirley. Shirley, I would like to know from you, you know, what are the roles of what role does the government play? You know, what has been done? You know, what are the gaps that you see? Yeah.
Thank you, Peace, and hope I'm audible. Yeah. Thank you, Peace. That's quite a spot. Yeah. I think we could start from the fact that the government is listening. Yeah. Sometimes I think there is a belief that government is not part of these conversations, the policymakers. But I like the way these conversations are being structured. That if you feel that the parliamentarians are the ones supposed to be part of these conversations, you bring them up. If it's government officials, you bring them up, so that they can get the information firsthand. And when we go back home, we actually try to incorporate these issues into the work that we're doing. So I'll refer more to what is happening back at home, especially at the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, to which I work with. And the fact is that we recognize the critical role of the multi-sectoral approach, and ensuring that all these issues are being embedded. So what we do is that I think I should give us a story. And that story is about my friends from Uganda. I hope you will recognize it. It's about the recently endorsed digital skills agenda that was put across. And this, why I'm bringing this up is that it came up, poured into place due to the conversations like this that are being had. And when we went back home, we thought that, as we are promoting digital rights, these are things, and digital literacy, these are things that should be impacted into our population starting from the youngest age. And what happened is that part of the clauses of the digital skills agenda was to ensure that children as young as from 5 years from primary school, they can have access to digital platforms and access to digital tools within school. And what happened is that it raised a lot of conversation in line with how are the children ready, how are they protected, how have they been equipped with the necessary skills so that they cannot be liable to cybercrime, to gender-based violence and all that. And then it's about taking a step forward and taking a few steps back. But then this also brings upon the idea of us appreciating why we should have such discussions and trying to identify solutions in which how best we can implement if we want to have digital literacy at all levels. Like, because we don't know the internet is like a basic need. It's a utility. If you do not have internet, it's like you do not have water, because you cannot work. You cannot, access the rest of the world. You cannot, access the digital economy. So how best can we support these different initiatives that are being put in place by the government or the civil society, the private sector players, so that we can achieve that one goal, so that we can move as a country with the rest of the world. So what we are doing is basically having these conversations as well and bringing on board the multi-stakeholder, engagement, so that by the time these policies are put into place, or strategies, the solutions that are being put out there, they're being appreciated, and we are working together to ensure, if it is sensitization and awareness that is required, are the young people ready to embrace the technologies and make the best out of them. So speaking about working with partners, we work with, I'll give an example of MTN Foundation. And what MTN is doing with the ministry is trying to, on top of just giving out digital literacy, it's also enabling the young people identify innovative ways on how to use these digital platforms that are being given to them. We are also in collaboration with MultiChoice, that is DSTV. And what this is basically doing is, giving media literacy, digital literacy skills to the journalists, to the communication officers, to the media representatives and all, so that while they are putting information out there, is it true? There is a question about you having a right and you being in position to have the liberty, that is the right, to have the liberty to express yourself in whatever way you do. But then the clause that comes with that is that you have the liberty to do whatever you want to do within your means, as long as you're not infringing on another person's rights. So sometimes the young people within our communities need to appreciate that as much as you would like to express yourself, are you not infringing on someone else's rights? And the Computer Misuse Act that has been mentioned by my fellow panelists also comes into play, because it has a clause that speaks about, it basically speaks about you ensuring that you're not encroaching on someone else's privacy as you are putting information out there. So I think it's about us working together to ensure that there is more sensitization and awareness and appreciation of all the different efforts that are being put in place. And then I think the other thing that the government is doing is to utilize the different media platforms, other than social media, which most of us in here have access to. We also appreciate the fact that there are people out there in rural communities undeserved communities that do not have access to these platforms. So there are partnerships that are being done with, radio stations, TV stations, as well as the players within those communities, if they're the leaders, if they're the local chairperson leaders, so that they can reach out to them and give them the right information. If it's about, I'll give us an example. If it's about, say, the Computer Misuse Act, everybody interprets the act in a way that they feel would be beneficial to them. But what the government is doing is to ensure that they are countering misinformation in line with that. So if it has been interpreted and people in communities that do not have access to these documents will not get the right interpretation because of misinformation that is all over social media. So you try to reach out to the different communities using these different platforms in the different languages that are easily understood by the people. Another thing that is being done is, of course, strengthening the legal frameworks that are being put in place, ensuring that they are actually implemented. There is always a challenge of having these policies that are very good on paper, but when it comes to the implementation, there is a challenge of how best are they implemented so that we can achieve what we believe they should achieve. So with this, still using the multi-stakeholder approach, we are working with different partners to ensure that these policies are being implemented. We're working with development partners. If it's the Japanese International Cooperation Agency, how are they helping us reach out to those communities and enable in, in the implementation, as well as harmonizing the reputation of the government. And then I think the last one that I would mention too is about digitization, and how we're embracing digitization, and why we are advocating for digitization is to ensure that there is transparency within the different systems. So the government putting its services online enables the citizens, first of all, apart from just accessing these services readily and in time within their conveniences, but then also there is a way it helps counteract the issue of misinformation, or what happens between the process of, of processing the different services required. If it is business registration, if the process is transparent from the application process to you receiving your business certification, and you can track it online, then it will eliminate that issue of, the citizens saying, oh, perhaps they do not want to give me the certificate because I'm a feminist, for example. Yeah. But if you can track that process online, and then if there are any additional requirements that are required, you get a prompt and then you respond. So the different services that are being offered online can also help us ensure the aspect of transparency. And this, we are seeing them in the different business in the different services being offered, passports, national IDs, and all. I think before I hand over the microphone back to Peace, I'll also just highlight the gaps, so that as we're having these conversations, we can also work together to identify the solutions that can help us, achieve our goals in line with that. So the gaps, of course, I already mentioned to the gap of implementation. And how we are trying to do this, and why we are taking part in these conversations, is to strengthen the enforcement mechanisms of the different, regulations, policies, and rules that are being out there. And then also embrace more emerging technologies. If we are talking about, deep fakes and a lot of miscommunication out there, can we embrace AI and, the technologies that out there that can help us detect this information before it defames an individual? So we are trying to embrace the technology, and through this we are not working as government alone, but with, innovators, because this is what the young people are supposed to do: come up, identify an issue, and come up with solutions. And with this, we provide with them the platforms like the innovation hub, so that they can, and collaboration spaces, so that they can be in position to come up with such solutions. The last one I'll speak to is basically just fostering more partnerships in the different areas, and then increase investment and contributions in line with digital literacy, so that as we are advocating for these young people to be digitally enabled and have the access to digital platforms, access to the internet, are they aware of the issues that may come for them, things to do with cybercrime, things to do with piracy, so that they are also ready, and they can readily embrace the technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shirley, and thank you for highlighting the different initiatives that you're doing as a government, and also emphasizing collaborations. And in all that you've mentioned is really strong collaborations, working with telcos, working with development partners, civil society, to ensure that you reach also the grassroots. Thank you. We are almost opening up to listen to you. Let's just listen to the only gentleman on the panel. It's for a reason, and that's why he's last. And Muthuri, let's just come to you, and please, could you just share with us some of the tools and mechanisms that platform owners are putting in place, to counter gender disinformation? And also, as you share that, please share with us some of the gaps that you identify, and yes, some of the gaps and some of the things that are really going well with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peace. It's a very interesting question, and as I respond to that question, I hope I won't be looked at as the person who've come to defend the mistakes that big tech are making, but I'll be seen as a form of awareness to the members in this room who can also share that outside. But also, as Peace mentioned, start looking at what has worked in terms of mechanism and tools that have been put in place and what have not worked. I think good presentation from my core panelists in terms of what has already been put in place from the external side. But as you're talking about multi-stakeholderism, looking at what is also being done internally, some of the interventions that the panelists have shared with the room are often at times in partnership with tech companies as well. Some of the research that have been alluded to, as Mozilla, for example, we've also commissioned pieces of research around gender disinformation and misinformation, and specifically in Uganda as well. But just to respond to the question, there are a couple of things that tech companies have done in terms of mitigating the risk that comes with usage of the platforms. But as I also lay out some of these mitigation measures, it's also important for me to mention that they have not, I can't say like it's been 100% been able to, for example, detect, remove disinformation, etc. But also there is a huge mistake that I think both the tech companies, the government and civil society have made in terms of lumping up these issues. For example, mixing misinformation, disinformation together with things like online gender-based violence, mixing them with online child safety, etc., etc. So I think one of the things in terms of the gaps is starting to look at these things separately, and if it's policies both by government and tech companies, specific issues, specific policies, specific tools as well. There are many tools and mechanisms that are out there. I mean, from simple, blocking that we do in our phones when you don't want your relatives to see wherever you're going to, your village people, which can also be used by us when it comes to combating misinformation, disinformation, all the way to what has been alluded to, AI tools and technologies that can pre-detect misinformation and disinformation. So a number of things. So one, I think, is the external mechanism that most of tech companies have put in place. We know a number of them have got like oversight bodies, advisory bodies, which bring together technologists, human rights defenders, etc., etc. And oftentimes, these are the bodies that, when there is an appeal process, when issues around gender disinformation or any other form of online gender-based violence is reported, gets to them for them to determine if actually there is any case to put out there or not. I saw Lillian in the room. I don't know where she went to, but she sits in the TikTok advisory board in sub-Saharan Africa. The second thing is the community guidelines, which most of us don't read. How many of us have read the Meta community guidelines? Yeah, we are all on Instagram, WhatsApp. We've never read these community guidelines. And as the name says it, it's the guideline for community members. So if you're using any of their product, you are a member of that community and you don't know the rules and regulation of how to live in that community. So it tells you what to do, what not to do, but also it tells you the exemptions that are there when you're using those platforms. So for example, the platform might say disinformation, misinformation is not allowed, and you know that legally and everything, but there is an exemption in that community guidelines in certain cases. For example, when there is public interest, they will allow disinformation, misinformation, then you will shout and you'll be like, what happened? But you've not read those community guidelines. There is something called something newsworthy kind of posts. They will allow that to fly in the platforms, and then you will rise there and complain, but you didn't read the community guideline. So community guideline is also another mechanism that tech companies have put in place to ensure that people are able to use the platforms in the right way. So when you go back to your spaces, please look at the community guideline and see what you signed for when you're using these platforms. Another tool or mechanism is what we keep discussing in these spaces, content moderation, which many of us, and when I was on the other side, just to mention, not very long ago, I was wearing Angela's shoes. I was working with Article 19 in her role. I kept talking about content moderation and its failures and everything. But of course, it's one of the tools that has been put there. It's not really worked. But in some instances, we've seen content being removed. When I was working with Article 19, I saw some content being removed, especially against human rights defenders and journalists, etc. But it's only 70 languages at the moment. But Cameroon has got 289 languages, just Cameroon alone. So we are very, very far from achieving that. But just to mention, it's also another thing. The next thing is like the engagement with civil society organizations, the human rights defenders, and the rest. If you've looked at the program for this event, you've seen a number of big tech, not a number, a few number of big tech logos in that event. So that's a form of mechanism just to allow conversations like this to happen around gender disinformation and what's not happening right in their platforms. So engaging with them. Some of us have also engaged with a partner, trusted partner relationship with some of these big tech. We've seen some of civil society organizations hosting members of big tech in their countries, engaging them, sitting down with them, and talking to them about their practices, their policies, and what have you. The next thing is around the policies. And one of the things that, for example, Article 19 has been working on is around the business and human rights guidelines. And what I know a number of big tech have done is just to try adopt that into corporate human rights kind of accountability, to look at human rights issues, freedom of expression being one of them, and of course the limitation around mis and disinformation, and then linking that to gender disinformation. Even including their policies I was looking at and are very interesting, looking at, you know, when we're talking about removing disinformation and just looking at authentic content, and now that we are getting into the AI revolution, looking at also synthetic content. For example, where we have, you know, your face has been cut as a female politician, then a nude body has been put down there. How do you deal with that as well? So now getting to that space to looking at not just authentic, but also synthetic content. There are policies that are really coming up around that. Looking at not just, for example, nude content, which has been put out there, but looking at, you were there, I was just hugging peace, but then you've sexualized it. You know, how do you also deal with such kind of disinformation as well? I've seen like a policy around that by one of the companies. So it shows that they're also like making step towards, you know, what is happening every other day. A number of tech companies also have got like women safety hubs with information. Additionally, I think there is like human right, human you know, capital investment around that. Looking at, I think a number of them have got like advisors around the same, having policy people around the same. So I think it's another way in which, another mechanism in which that has been put in place just to look at specifically women issues in the space. Now moving to tools, and I think this will be like very interesting, the conversation about if there are any tools to detect and to look at it. I think a couple of tools have been built by big tech and handed over to civil society organizations to run in terms of detecting some of these things. And as I mentioned, this is probably an awareness session for me just to share this out. For example, the stopncci.org tool for non-consensual intimate imagery, just detecting that. So, and what happens is you use a hash, you go to the ncci.org, you can use your own hash, so it can be numbers and letters, and then log in. So if your photo has already gone out, so report that photo, and then immediately it will stop spreading further. And that is for people over 18. And for people under 18, again, for children, for their safety, there is the takeitdown.ncmec.org, also a platform that was built by big tech, handed over to civil society to work around that. Finally, I will talk about the whole transparency issues. I think most of big tech from the year 2012 have been able to release their transparency report, just showing what they have done in terms of fighting online gender-based violence, disinformation. All the way, I think there are companies which have already released their 2023 transparency report. And the good thing is, even as big tech releases this transparency report, there are organizations that have decided to take this transparency report and just look at them further. Access Now has got the transparency index, just looking at which company releases reports every year, how do they release, how transparent these reports are. Having mentioned all that, all is not rosy, right? Hello? Are we together? Are we together? Thanks. All is not rosy. And that's why the whole question of multi-stakeholderism, and it's very interesting to have government, civil society, the rest on the panel, and how we can work together. I think big in terms of what I've presented is for us to start engaging with these tools. I don't know how many of you had engaged with any of those tools, any of those mechanisms. How many of you knew that you can use your block button on your digital platform to avoid being trolled, not to avoid being stalked by your relative in the village only, but you can also use it to avoid, many other things. How many of you had looked at the community guideline? So for me, the gap is awareness. The gap for me is enhancing these tools, understanding these tools, but also the uptake by the users on these tools that are out there. Thank you very much. Peace.
Thank you very much, Muthuri, and I was learning as well. So we're not doing. What you have just shared with us shows that we also have a gap from our side as users, and we are complaining. Like reading these guidelines. So thank you very much. And you mentioned really things that are very crucial, like the transparency report. It's important, and it's also important for us to look into these reports as civil society, as users of these platforms, as people who are vulnerable to this and misinformation or gender disinformation. I will open the floor right away because we don't have time. Yes, we have a first hand there. Second, yes. If you could, yes, please take you have a hand as well? Do you? Okay, so the two hands behind there. Yes, and then the two here, and maybe if you want to take on.
Okay, thank you so much to our panelists. My name is Badru Walusansa. I'm from Uganda, and I have just about 3 concerns. Briefly, I think in terms of...
It's working. I think the position just... Yes.
Okay, so I think in terms of the guidelines, well, we have the guidelines and of course the standards, but I think we need to emphasize the issue of enforcement, especially by the regulatory authorities. I think most of the regulatory authorities, not excluding where I come from, there's a lot of cherry picking, especially when it comes to, of course, political disinformation, religious disinformation, and little effort has been invested in, going for those that are, fond of gender disinformation. So just to say, for you can see UCC coming up in arms for someone who's actually speaking ill about the government, and you will not see the same UCC coming for someone on the media or on a particular radio station or TV station who's trolling women. So I think it is important, or not only even women, but all of us. So I think it is very important to emphasize the issue of enforcement as very key and do not cherry pick. The other aspect is, of course, this goes to mindset change. With a mindset change, and one of the things that I've learned, I'm Muslim, practicing Muslim. But you see, there is a way the Muslim community have set it that even if you're appearing on a particular radio station or TV, or you're on social media, and you try to demonize Muslims, they will come for you. You know, so I think in terms of mindset, we need to go back into the community and especially preach that, because it will be very, very important, because now everyone will know that, you know, it is a no-go zone for someone to come and, you know, spread the gender disinformation, like we're saying. So I think the issue of creating that mindset is very important, and also creating even opportunities to blow the whistle, especially where we have detected such instances, is very key. Lastly is on the issue of, we are talking about creating awareness and then training of media, but we are forgetting the creatives. I can tell you, most of the creatives, artists, comedians, that is where most of, you know, the gender disinformation is. Sexual jokes, statements, innuendos, quite a lot. And it is very, very common where I come from. So I think we need to as well tap into, you know, the associations and see how best we can create awareness, or even train them on how they can package their content. In other words, someone can still be funny without being, you know, without spreading the gender disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Mbando from Digital Agenda for Tanzania Initiative. Okay, I encountered the community guideline when I was using Facebook on August, just at the end of August. I think it's more updated, and then if you're not very careful, it's more about security. Okay, it's more about security. For instance, I was frequently using Facebook, my Facebook account, and then a moment that I just switched to another app like Instagram. When I went back to Facebook, it said you have violated community guidelines. So if you're not careful, it's either they're down, you will skip it, or you will just follow what they are saying. At the end of the day, there is a message there that you have to upload a video that you are talking like a human being, or you have to upload a picture. So you should also be very careful. Either sometimes you have not violated, but look at your settings. Have you tried to update, because there are some updates that are there. This is a caution that I'm giving you. Might lose your account which you have developed for a long time, and then you are not aware what is going on. So I had to go to select one of the picture which shows that I'm who I am. Then later on, just a few seconds, I went back, then I clicked it back again, and they apologized. They said, no, you did not violate the community guidelines. We are very sorry that when we were logging in, we did not pay attention so there was something. So take care of your account and do some kind of, we call it regular checking in and checking out to see that. I think they are trying to remove those ones who maybe they've died a long time ago. They did not update.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you. And then we have a hand just there. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Mina Bilkis from Sierra Leone. I'm a storyteller and a digital rights researcher.
Bit louder?
Oh, a bit louder. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm from Sierra Leone. My question is towards you. I really liked what you said. I resonated with self-censorship. It's something that I've had to practice the past 2 years, given regressive and repressive governments in my country. And so 2 years ago, there was an incident that happened wherein citizens were protesting against bad governance and cost of living. It ended up being very violent, and both civilians and army personnel died. The government labeled it an insurrection. It's not, but that's the official term. And quickly after that, they weaponized the Cybercrime Security Act against us. And that has led to the arrest of some of my colleagues. My question is, in your country, and this can go to any of you all on the panel, how have other content creators or digital human rights defenders had to safeguard themselves with these kind of laws that have come into have come to play in the past 2 to 3 years. Thanks.
Thank you. And my personal friend, why is he there?
Thank you very much. My name is Wazi. Just taking us back to the central point of the panel, which is to assess the effectiveness or usefulness of the multi-stakeholderism as a mechanism to deal with disinformation. And I think that it's very important to really assess how does it play out in reality, because it's not an innocent thing. Different stakeholders come with different interests, different power dynamics, and so it's provide, of course, an opportunity for us to discuss, but it doesn't necessarily dealt with the substantive issues because power dynamics play. Government is an interested party often in the perpetuation of disinformation. Platforms themselves profit by allowing disinformation to propagate because it generates the traffics, you know. And so I think that we need to be aware of those things. Now, when you talked about the community standards, I think that my experience shows that often people are dissatisfied with the response that they get from platform owners, you know. I do quite a lot of reporting, flagging misinformation. And often the response you get, oh, this has not violated our community standards, you know. And that means that there's a whole wide range of latitudes within which information that citizens don't, see as disinformation is allowed to propagate in that. So I think that we need to really interrogate this, and we need to push for more accountability and transparency on the part of platform owners, because they profit on this. And so to what extent will they reduce those profits and allow us to have a safer digital space? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other hand up, comment or question? So that, yes, please.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais parler en français.
No, I don't
You was
think.
not ready.
If you can speak in
So,
English,
oh yeah, let me
it would
try in
help.
English.
Otherwise, we need to get the translation. Is bullying?
Yes.
Let me say what he just said, that this is offline bullying.
I'm just hearing
Thank you.
some point about the term of condition of the community's guideline. Regarding our context in West Africa, most of disinformation type coming from the institutional side, the state house, the ministry, and the president. Maybe sometime the main channel broadcaster like the television, the national one. Which is your point of view about this kind of disinformation in Africa?
Thank you. And Muthiri, I think you will take the mic first.
Thank you very much. To start with you, I think when I was on the other side, when I was working with civil society, I used to say government is the biggest source of misinformation and disinformation. I don't know if that has changed. but they'll respond to the question further. But to community guideline, I think that's what I can mostly touch on. And I think thanks for that example that you gave. And just allow me to do a small exercise just to show what he talked about. How many of us are on LinkedIn? Quickly go to your phone, go to LinkedIn, go to settings. They changed, right? That? Yeah. Go into settings. Go to data privacy. Now, if you've not been checking, if you're a community member of LinkedIn but has not been checking these things like this, if you go down there and you'll see there is manage your data and activity, get a copy of your data, manage cookie preferences, search history, personal demographic information, social, economic, and workplace research, and then data for generative AI improvement. And I know most of you yours are on, right? On. And so you've been giving LinkedIn your data. So it says there, can LinkedIn and its affiliates use your personal data and content to create? You've never switched that off, but you've been using LinkedIn. So see, I mean, what the example he gave is good. Keep going back to these community guidelines. Keep checking. This was just updated the other day, and you guys didn't know. LinkedIn is using your data to build their AI models, and you guys have already allowed it, and it's on. So that's just one of the examples, and I think that was a good example that he that he gave. I agree with what is his name? YZ in terms of the dynamics to hold tech companies accountable. How is it possible for you to get, for example, funding from Mozilla, and then you have a problem with Firefox? So becomes, how do you do that? So I think these things like that are a reality, so for us to see how we work together. And then that brings us to that issue of multi-stakeholderism. The only thing I disagree with you is pointing fingers every time. In quoting Angela, big tech might not be the problem. We, the society, might be the problem. Thank you.
Can I go? Okay. I wanted to respond to the meaningfulness of the multi-stakeholder approach. And my strong position is that we are not meaningfully engaging big tech platforms. I say this because I have been in these spaces for 7 years, 5 years, and the engagements with big tech are very one-sided. It's them coming here to tell us about their terms and policies and their practices. But hardly are we really seeing policies being shaped by our views, our African views especially. So the idea that when I sign the terms and conditions of Facebook, I have agreed to the community guidelines. Maybe I don't agree with their public policy, public person, I don't know, policy, for instance, right? And do I have enough chance to engage with them for them to hear what I have to say about their policies? And are they open enough to change? I feel like we are yet to get to where they change policies based on the feedback they're getting from the community. To address your question around how cybersecurity laws are being used to clamp down on protesters or in government dissidents, I can speak from the Kenyan experience. So what Article 19 strategy has been for a long time is to intervene in cases like those and try to say that those provisions are unconstitutional. And the reason is free speech has its standards under international human rights law, but you'll also find it in your constitutions. And for a limitation of free speech to be legitimate, there are 3 things that need to be met. 1, the limitation must be by law, so you'll find maybe the Act of Parliament or some law, right? But we don't stop at the law. We need to look at whether it was a necessary limitation on free expression. So for instance, limitations on free expression because of sedation, for instance, has been held to be unconstitutional in our Kenyan constitutions because it's too amorphous, it's too ambiguous. And you know that these are criminal laws, and the rule in criminal law is that you need to define the offense so well and so clearly, right, and make sure that there's age verification in websites before someone can access pornography. Such measures are least restrictive and we can still uphold free expression while getting to the aims that the state is trying to say they're using these aims for. So I would ask more civil society organizations to keep going to court, to keep challenging these legislations, because these legislations, and this is something I keep talking to people about, are sometimes relics of colonialism, sedition laws, laws against transparency, laws on criminal defamation. These are colonial relics. They are laws that were passed down to us by our colonizers and have no place in an open and democratic society. In the open Africa we want, where human rights are being respected and free speech is being respected. So I'll just end it at that.
Thank you. Yeah. And anyone else, we can go around, and you can also already start to, because of time, tell us what are the steps that we need to take, as different stakeholders. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll just pick up from what Angela said. Us being advocates and, interesting ourselves in these spaces, if it is going to court, can we first appraise ourselves on, on the different clauses, and then also extend this knowledge to our communities so that, our fellow young people are not caught on the wrong end of the line. I think I also just want to respond to Badru about interesting, okay, if the creatives are also being trained, because they've fallen prone to a lot of gender-based violence. And this is something that is being done in Uganda in partnership with MultiChoice. We are bringing on board the creatives as well, the journalists, the reporters, so that they know how better to, to put their information out there, yes. And as they're marketing themselves, how best are they putting their, their production and their content out there, so that they are not liable to cybercrime.
Okay, so I don't know what to say. Usually when Angela speaks, what do I have to say? But I think what I would say just as a way forward, like Angela said, we were already also doing a couple of work already with APC, and hearing from the conversation they held at DRIF, I would like to just ask the room, who next is ready to host a conversation on gender disinformation, so that there's more awareness, and also this is known that is the challenge, and some work is being done. So who is ready to take on the next conversation?
There is a question here that who wants to hold this similar conversation? Could be at national level, for instance, with your partners in the different countries you come from. Who is willing to have such a conversation to create more awareness on gender disinformation? There's a hand there. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah,
You
so
will
I
do
see the Okay, so I like that people who are in this room, of course, might be interested in the conversation, and I like that there's some commitment on holding this conversation, making it known much more. And also, one thing that Tigis also mentioned was being able to map out who is doing the work on these issues. We have Mozilla, we have Association for Progressive Communications, we have some people in this room, we have Article 19, we have Ministry of ICT, and also Women of Uganda Network. So if we come together, I think we are able to, first of all, do a comprehensive research. First of all, highlighting very local contextual issues, and also identifying the voices of different identities. That will be very important. Ensuring that we have the local perspective on the social, the cultural, that is also very key. And I think that with that research, it will really be very important that for in-country, how can we have maybe a national task force? Anthony, I've seen Anthony somewhere in the corner, and we have this convening that we always have on countering countering what is it, Anthony? I've forgotten. But it's something that we always all conversation together as women of Uganda Network to counter narratives on what are some of the challenges that women are facing onto the online platform. So if we can do some things like that, what Muzuri also mentioned about having the women's safety hubs, I think would be also a good aspect for us to do. So I think that's what I would say as next step for us leaving this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, as a way of closing up the session from my side, I think research organizations, civil society, I think I'm situated in that space, so I'm going to speak from that place. I think the first thing is, I have said it in my presentation too, we are very much aware of who the victims are. We are not yet naming and clearly stating who are the instigators or the criminals. And I think pointing out accountability of actors, exposing, naming the problems that exist in systems is far more important in this kind of conversation. For example, in this conversation, I was very uncomfortable that there was such a forgiveness to metas structure. I can name countries: Myanmar, Ethiopia, Sudan, Palestine, DRC, and I can go on. We have seen so much distraction based on Facebook's work. Yes, you could sell your content, committee guideline or whatever, but that doesn't make the fact that people are dying because you're not taking that down in content moderation. At the same time, in fact, I go further saying that because you put a content community guideline that is almost puristic, but you're not delivering it, that in itself is disinformation. That's in itself actually misguide people to trust on the platform and be there as part of the members and then get into such problematic situations. And so let's not do that. And the other part of it is also governments. We know in many of African countries there is a dictatorship that is going on. We know our governments are homophobic. We know they are against feminist conversations or feminists. And so sticking with innovation structure as a solution are escape. Governments need to be responsible. And I can refer to what was happening in Uganda, what just happened in August in Ethiopia, by governments using technology like TikToks and others to actually outed queer people, endanger them, and at the same time to fuel homophobia, homosexuality is un-African, and then fuel that hatred into escalating days and escape from the country. So governments also need to be hold accountable. It's impossible not to move forward without that kind of conversation. Now, that's the activist part of it. As a researcher, I think research organizations and funders should intentionally facilitate and work with researchers from different places, countries, and diverse communities. And I see it also when it comes to misinformation, disinformation conversation, we tend to commission research. We don't get it to the ground, to the people who are actually being affected, to tell their stories, to document it, to expose it. And so in the end, what happens is you have a macro level analysis that swallows individuals and community story. And that needs to be stopped. It needs to be restructured. And then finally, I just want to say that when we do research, and this comes from me being an academic and also a researcher, it would be good for people to actually do a capacity building around storytelling, holding people's story with care from a feminist perspective, and as much as we can, not to use people's story to accommodate whatever agenda that we have, rather to give it much more weight into fixing the problem that we see in our life. I just want to say that. Thank you.
Okay. So for me, it's to thank APC for inviting me to be the bad guy in the panel. I really appreciate the conversation. In terms of multi-stakeholderism, which was the center of this conversation, I think let's make it meaningful. Let it go beyond this room. I think it's not enough for us to say we have civil society, we have government, we have a couple of us. We don't have builders in the room. We don't have devs in the room. These are the people who are developing these digital platforms and products that we have issues with. So let's also have them in the room. Let's take multi-stakeholderism even down to the community. I mean, we're talking about disinformation, and we're having this conversation in this room, knowing that it's bad to do, to engage in mis and disinformation. Whereas even in our community, we see people engaging in that. And I keep using this example of the recent protest in Kenya, where even those with good intention decided to get in the murky water of misinformation and disinformation. And in the famous phrase, we call it aura for aura on X, propaganda for propaganda. So let's also be careful in terms of, let's be keen or let's be mindful of what multi-stakeholderism is and make it meaningful. Thank you.
Clap for him first. Yes, I wanted you to clap for him because I wanted to correct him that in free speech we also protect parody, satire, and we know the place of these forms of acts in expressing ourselves, especially in dictatorship, especially in regimes where governments are using the very same digital technologies to harm us, to destroy our reputation. I think those in the room who are from Kenya know what the activists were going through, being named as the people who are collaborating with State House, or that they have mismanaged the funds that were raised by people. All this is coming from government-paid bloggers. And so in such a regime, how do you expect me not to respond with fire? Right? Yes. So I support Aura for Aura to the extent that satire and parody is protected speech. For my closing remarks, it's just to say that we need to stop this cosmetic engagement with big tech platforms, and not just big tech platforms, but even with government. And I say this with government on the panels here today, that we want to go beyond the nice statements you come up with and actually talk about the issues that harm us. When you're on a panel with feminists or people from a background where they've been harmed by digital technologies, they're not coming for you to be defensive. They're coming for you to tell you that there are ways you can respond that can actually help us. So we need to have a meaningful engagement with all the stakeholders where we actually see the needle moving, and not just everyone trying to have these defensive hardline positions on the so-called you must tweet with, what do they call it? Be mindful of what you tweet and all this. And we know the problem is beyond people being mindful about what they're tweeting. We are talking about an era where we have digital technologies that make it easier for misinformation, disinformation, a whole industry on misinformation and disinformation with commercial interest, with an appetite for these types of material. So it's beyond the usual public awareness that we talk about. So I just wanted to end it at that.
Okay, so Edwin, what are you trying to say? Okay, yes, we are done. Thank you very much for joining this conversation, and thank you very much to distinguished panelists. Let's give them a big round of applause for their thoughts, yes? And let's also clap for ourselves for listening and thinking through, and I know all of you recommitted yourself, in this conversation, even if you didn't lift your hand up. I will not go through what our outcomes and our next actions or our takeaways are, but we will have a blog posts on this conversation, and all of us here have been doing different initiatives, and this conversation will further inform the different initiatives that we'll be doing. And just to say that we are committed to keep pushing. Anybody who wants to join this conversation, invite and organize any other conversation, wherever you come from, we will be happy to join. Please, thank you very much. I'm happy that we did it. Yeah. Thank you. Edwin, is it break tea or something? Okay.
Those who want to attend civil society strengthening in the digital civic space is up next. We start from where you have stopped. Yeah. What's yours, was that? The role of multistakeholderism in countering gender disinformation. Okay, gender. How are the men being helped? Gender is men and women. And how are we being helped?